So the first question is about keeping it simple. I always met this challenge in my organization and would like to get the feedback from the experienced evaluator. When I present research evaluation findings, I want to include statistical coefficients to demonstrate the rigorous approaches that I used while conducting the research, but sometimes the audience is not interested and not capable to understand, and I'm advised to avoid difficult methodological terms. I make decisions about the content based on who is the audience, but still, what is the rule of thumb among the evaluators community?
Okay, that's a very good question. So first of all, I would not say that there is a rule of thumb when it comes to presenting content. Of course, the first rule or the first principle would be to know your audience. So on the one hand, you want to show that you have done a rigorous effort. So you will want to mention the exact methods and techniques that you used, especially also when it concerns multivariate statistical analysis. You want to say something about model specification. You may want to say something about how you arrived at what variables go into the model, whether there are any issues with the data, and how you underpin your conclusions. But this, again, depends wholly on the point that you want to make. What I often have done when I present findings of evaluations which has a statistical analysis component is that sometimes I show on a slide a table which shows the model specification, but I don't go through it. So it's basically to show this is what we have found, and this is an example, and then in very common language, non-technical language, I explain, for example, one coefficient. To give an example, in a logistic regression analysis, it was a multinomial logistic regression model, to explain the relationship between police participating in police literacy training and the effect on literacy levels. I explained one particular coefficient in detail, and then made a general statement around what can we conclude from this, basically concluding that controlling for relevant other factors such as prior schooling, regional and individual characteristics, there is a statistically significant relationship between participation in adult police literacy training and literacy levels. So you just have the table in the background, you don't go through it, but you show you have done a rigorous job, you show how you interpret it, and then you follow up with a clear, concise conclusion.
Wonderful. Let's go for the next one. Presenting applied evaluations versus academic papers. So the question is the following. I would like to know how to do a presentation about a subject that has not been written down as a proper academic article yet. We just have an abstract and some previous research. If I am presenting an experience from a recently conducted evaluation versus an academic paper, what would be the best focus? Would such presentation necessarily contain a very novel content? For example, could build on a presentation done on a similar subject during previous conferences? When presenting academic papers, how much theoretical background existing research should be shared during my oral presentation with the audience before presenting my own research dilemma, possible findings? And is it encouraged to have an academic referencing in my slides?
Okay. So these are three related but also quite different questions. So starting with how do you give a presentation when there is no full article yet? So I can be relatively concise on this. Many of the best articles that have been published or papers that have been written have started with a PowerPoint. So a PowerPoint is a very useful tool to really focus your thoughts, because you are forced to synthesize a very complex topic into core sentences and core points. So I would say there's nothing wrong with not having a paper. In fact, often a PowerPoint is the starting point. Then the second question is about if presenting experience from recently conducted, what would be the best focus? So first of all, you are giving a presentation to an audience in a very limited time span, 15 minutes maximum. You want to really have the audience go home with 1 or 2 thoughts, key thoughts, not more than that. So really make sure what is the message that you want to convey. So usually it's about really making a strong point about what is rigorous or new in the evaluation process, what innovative or challenging methodological issues did you address, or how did you conceptualize a particular phenomenon in reality, such as poverty alleviation, empowerment, or whatever, or maybe you want to focus on the findings, but don't do all things at the same time. Really focus on one of these points, and that determines also what you should focus on and what you present your time on. So if your analysis is about conceptualizing a particular phenomenon, then existing literature on that construct, for example, different theories about looking at empowerment, becomes more important. So you may wish to give more attention to showing different strands in literature and maybe your structured literature review approach and how you went through the literature. But if that is more peripheral, don't bother with just presenting a lot of context or background, because it's not to the core. So don't do that. And then the final one, when presenting academic papers, how much theoretical? Yeah, this is again, I think I already answered that. If your research is about adding a new perspective to the literature, then you need to focus on the literature. If, however, your evaluative presentation is much more related to addressing practical methodological challenges or how to deal with a particular issue given political constraints, how to do an institutional analysis in a systematic way, maybe the literature research is much more peripheral. So don't spend too much time on it. But of course, it's always to show. It's good to show very concisely that you know the literature. So you can mention on the slide, I have gone through the literature using some kind of systematic approach, maybe a very simple protocol. These are the different strands of literature that I briefly looked at, and these are some of the messages that come out. So keep it very concise and focused to what you're saying.
Okay, great. I think those are great advices. Let's go for the third question, which is on visuals. We have one of the emerging evaluators is going to present on the use of video on evaluation. So if you use a video approach when conducting the evaluation or the evaluation process, and then you use it to communicate the evidence and the value added by evaluation, then you are obviously contributing to better decision making and to influencing the end users of evaluation. And the question here is, in this case, it would be nice to share some video recording. And the person is asking if they should start the screening at the beginning, at the end. How should they approach? How should they present? How should, in this case, her present?
Yeah.
Actually, Kenzo is there. We can see her.
Okay. So I've never used video in evaluation as a method. Considering that this is relatively novel, I would say start up with a very short sound bite. What does it really mean? And then give a flash, very short. This is what we mean with using video for evaluative purposes. Then you start with your overview of why you're using this approach, how you did it, what are the advantages in terms of rigor or depth of analysis, what are some of the restrictions in terms of confidentiality, etc. And if you want to make very clear, strong points on, for example, rigor or depth of analysis or understanding the complexity of a topic, you can always use short fragments to illustrate that. But again, that depends on what you want to convey. You do not want to have your presentation just to be a video, but you want to have people really get enough of a sense what it is about. Maybe also use it to substantiate some key messages if you want. But again, I have never done this.
Yeah. So you will be there. Looking forward to this summer. No. The fourth question is very interesting because we all go through it. It's about responding questions from the audience. How should we handle questions from the audience in general? More specifically, what about the difficult, tricky questions? What if we don't have the answers to some of the audience questions?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I think it's a good premise to start with the assumption that you are the person who knows most about what you're presenting. So feel confident and feel relaxed when you're presenting. At the same time, also realize that on specific aspects of your work, particular methods or perspectives or views, there it is likely that there are people in the room who know much more about it. And that's fine. Just be very honest. You are there to receive feedback from the audience. You are there to have a discussion. You're there not just to share your knowledge, but also to benefit from their feedback. So just say, thank you for that thoughtful remark. I really haven't thought about this. This is something I think that I really would like to look into more. Maybe we can talk about it offline. So just be relaxed and honest about it. There's nothing wrong with not knowing everything.
So we go for the question number 5 about methodological choices. Is there anyone, the person who wrote this question, is the person in the room? Because the question is a bit broad. Maybe if you can elaborate more on it, it would help. Because the question is the following: I would like to know how to write about methodological choices in a paper. Example, why a Delphi technique rather than a nominal group technique. This is a bit broad. Could you give more details? If not, while you think, I will go for unless you have an immediate answer for this.
Oh yeah, I have lots to say on methodology. Depends on how interesting it is.
No, it is. If you have something very quick that you want that immediately comes to your mind.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I do agree. This is a very broad question, writing about methodological choices, but it's useful to keep a number of principles in mind. So first of all, think about logic of design. So why do you choose a certain method? Because there's a logical methodological response to particular questions. So you can have a description that requires in-depth interview, portfolio review, or literature review. You have a causal question that may need a certain quasi-experimental design or an in-depth case study design. There should be a certain logic that really flows from the question that gives already a sense of what is the depth and breadth of analysis that you are going to provide with the method. So the method includes the particular technique, but also issues around sampling and selection, for example. Now, second angle to the methodological choice issue is, are you aware of comparative advantages of different methods? And here it is, I think, useful to have two sets of dimensions in mind. So one is what you could call almost an intrinsic comparative advantage in dealing with particular aspect of validity. So is a method really equipped to deal with causal issues? Is a method really strong on construct validity issues and really generating depth of knowledge? Is a method really equipped to provide information with a high degree of external validity? So usually, broadly speaking, particular comparative advantages that you want to convey, and of course, it needs to be backed up by your knowledge of the methodological literature. Now, a second dimension is applicability. As you know, evaluation is applied social science research and under time, data, resource, political constraints. So you have to show the methodological applicability within these real-world constraints. So potential rigor, visibility, adding them together is a good platform to provide an informed reasoning about methods choice. And then, of course, the prior point that I made, logic, the logic of the method responding to the question. Again, there's a lot of detail to be said about this.
It's very good. It's very good. It helps to structure. Then we have question number 6 on evaluation-specific requirements. This is also also something that comes often. I would like to know whether there are any particular aspects to consider when having a presentation or writing a paper in the field of evaluation compared to other fields of research.
Yeah.
I think this is very interesting, particularly for those who come from other areas into evaluation. How different is it?
Yeah, so there's various points to be made here. So remember what evaluation is about. So evaluation, again, I'm going to repeat it, is applied social science research under time, data, resource, political constraints. So showing how you deal with these constraints and how you can get a feasible and credible design in place, that is much more important in evaluation than in research. Research is basically knowledge for knowledge is the overarching goal. In evaluation, that is not the overarching goal, and we have a lot of constraints that research has. So that is a very important difference. So again, the second related point is the goal for evaluative analysis is not just to have more in-depth knowledge about what works, but really to feed into organizational learning, accountability processes, etc. So utility is an important aspect that you may want to highlight. Why do we do evaluations? Not to just have reports gathering dust on a shelf. No, they have to be useful for different stakeholder groups, which may be operational colleagues, which may be management colleagues, which may be the board or oversight of an organization, or of course the general public. But often it is more immediately the direct stakeholders of a particular intervention. So that is also very important. Let's see if I forgot anything.
Yes, the second part I think you've tackled. Is there any guidance or approach that states clearly the aspects of developing an article based on evaluation findings?
Yeah. So let me make another point here. This is more related to a conference like the American Evaluation Association conference or the European Evaluation Society conference or any other national evaluation society conference. What distinguishes those conferences from academic conferences is that in evaluation conferences, people come together not to talk about findings. So they are not interested in what did you find in whether this particular program works in Kazakhstan or whether conditional cash transfers really led to higher school enrollment in Mexico or not. These are questions that you would want to discuss at an academic conference where knowledge about a substantive topic may be important, but in evaluation what is more important is how we approach things. How do we conceptualize things? How do we methodologically design things, and how do we deal with methodological challenges? How do we deal with institutional challenges? How do we deal with practical challenges? These are questions that are much more important. So you may wish to dwell much less on describing the context or describing the findings, but really focus on conceptual, methodological, practical, institutional challenges, etc.
Okay, we should go back to that. Let's pause here and 20 minutes of on answering to these general questions. We met that goal, and I would open the discussion to the rest of the participants. Would anybody like to do a follow-up question or has a very particular case that you would like to present about your own presentation and suggestions that you would like to hear from Jos?
I would definitely be on the line for it.
Okay, go ahead, Nora.
Good.
Thank you.
You can't see me. Here we go.
We can. We can.
Okay.
Now we can.
Now you might.
It's fine. Go ahead.
Good. Yes, I'm talking from Abuja, where I'm writing my PhD here, and thank you very much. It was very interesting to hear, especially the differences between the academic and the evaluation conferences. And what I'm hoping to present in the labs, and I think it's a great chance for us it's sort of a practice for us to be my first evaluation conference, for instance, so a safe space to present. But I'm starting my PhD about indicator study, so it's I have these world polity and governance theories about how the governance structures do become similar within time, like this concept of isomorphism of molding into one. But I'm in a very early stage, so I don't really have the findings to present yet, and that's why it was so nice to hear from you just saying that findings are not always so important. But what would you say the conference participants would find interesting? Would they find interesting to hear about sort of the existing research about the hidden power play that indicators consist themselves? Because I, for instance, find that would be something interesting to talk about. Or then more thematically, I have a women, peace and security agenda, so more about how measuring women's meaningful participation and what are the current strands of measuring meaningful and sort of constructive participation. So what do you think with this topic, indicators and women, peace and security and governance would be out of interest for the conference participants?
Thank you for your question. Very interesting research. Again, just to emphasize, there is no one monolithic audience in a European Evaluation Society conference. There are people from different organizational settings and they have different interests. So you may have researchers who do evaluative policy-oriented research similarly as you, who are interested more in let's say, the underlying theories of conceptualization of your policy-oriented issue. And there may be evaluators who are more interested in it. Okay, how does this research really benefit our institutional learning and potentially our operational policy answers to the problem that you're describing? So I think you should go with your own gut feeling about what do I really want to talk about and what do I feel comfortable talking about as a first starting point. So having said that, the challenge of moving from a very diffuse, complex literature on some different strands of literature, and combining that with a very highly complex issues such as governance in Nigeria, which is obviously very relevant for development intervention, and then going to an empirical approach of trying to capture aspects of good governance, that trinity is amazingly interesting, and especially the issue of measurement. So how do you translate very complex ideas about governance into measurement? That would be, for me, the most interesting aspect. And of course, as an evaluator, I always try to then think about, is there anything that we can learn from your deep, in-depth, conceptual, analytical approach for more finding out fast, policy-oriented initiatives? So you are now, as a young researcher, policy-oriented researcher / evaluator, you're on the spectrum of spending a lot of time on one particular topic with a lot of depth of analysis. When you move more towards the spectrum of policy evaluation attached to budgets, accountability, organizational constraints, you are moving into the finding out fast part of evaluative research. So is there anything that the finding out fast part of the community can learn from your deep thinking on governance issues? I hope this is helpful. I'm not sure whether I'm responding to your question.
Very much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to share doubts, questions?
May I just add a little bit to this? So I can just say that I really appreciate your research focus. And I was talking to some Nigerian colleagues, and and they say, they have this proverb in Nigeria. You always need two hands to clap. So, one person cannot steal. It's always an agreement between two persons. They together have to make a deal in order to, make some, let's say, more corrupt practice or less formal aspect to make it work. So to understand the political economy of budgeting, resource allocation in very complex intercultural context such as Nigeria is so fascinating and so relevant for those of us who are in organizations that put billions into the Nigerian economy. So anyway.
No, it's great. If there is no one else, I can proceed with questions for Jos. But yeah, maybe I will do it, and then if you want to pose a question, you can simply do it. Feel free to write it in the chat or interrupt me. You were talking about the difference between an evaluation conference, Jos, and a normal conference, or a scientific conference where we are interested on the findings. I was wondering what would be the best structure for the labs and for them to present, because some of them do not have a very, very mature research or experience in evaluation. We were discussing earlier the possibility of eventually having them present on the challenges and the process of the challenges they faced during their first evaluation, and what were of course the great things that you've learned, but also the challenges that you went through. Perhaps it could help some of you who do not yet have a notion or a concrete idea on what to present. If you could you could focus on your first evaluation and try to describe it and take it as a pilot, as an experience of how to present in an evaluation conference. If they go for it, what would be the structure? Because based on everything we said, maybe focusing on the gap or on the literature review is not. It's probably not the most relevant. How would you go about the structure of the presentation?
Yeah. Okay. So let me say something first about scoping in general. Okay. So maybe you wish to read the book by Marv Elkin, The Evaluation Tree. Have you heard about it?
No.
2004. It basically. It's a little bit dated already, but still highly relevant in terms of how to conceptualize evaluation, how to classify it. And it basically classifies the world of evaluation into three broad ways of thinking that are really specific to evaluation as a field of practices. So one big branch, one of the three branches of the tree is the branch of methods. So different methodological approaches that we use in evaluations, ranging from, very qualitative to very quantitative approaches, mixed methods, designs, etc. So that's one area of thought where you can make your mark. Anything that relates to the rigor, feasibility of methods. The second big tree is the branch of theory. And we're not talking here about program theory or substantive theory, like the theory about utility maximization. We're talking here about the theory of evaluation. So how do you do evaluation? And think about collaborative evaluation, empowerment evaluation, utilization-focused evaluation, goal-free evaluation, goal-oriented evaluation. All of these are examples of different theories about how to do evaluation. So what is your angle into the business of assessing the merit and worth of a policy intervention? That's one other branch where you can make your mark, and there's a huge literature and discussion on that. And finally, the third branch of evaluation as a field of practices is the whole issue of valuing. So whose values count in an evaluation? how do you value? What are values? So the things like leaving no one behind, human rights-based approaches, the ethics of doing an assessment where you bring together different points of view and make a judgment of something which affects the lives of multiple groups of people. So the whole issue of values is another branch of the tree. So if you want to position your evaluative work, think about these three branches as interesting backgrounds in which you wish to read up on or know something about. Now, in terms of going back to the much more practical, concrete level of structuring a presentation, again, I repeat, you want to remember, you want to go away from the conference, from your session, with the idea that there is at least one thought that lingers in the minds of the audience. So what is the one thought that you want to convey to your audience? So if you meet somebody 4 months later after the yEES conference and that person was in your session, and you, first of all, you want them to remember your session, which is already a big feat if you achieve that. And secondly, you want them to remember the one thing that you wanted to convey. So they are not interested in your long descriptions of your research context or the country context. They are not interested in that. They are interested in the one analytical point that you want to make. And that one analytical point relates to your unique response to dealing with a methodological challenge, your unique response to set up a certain process of collecting and analyzing data, your unique response to conceptualizing an institutional system that is at the same time comprehensive, realistic and feasible, etc. So that one point, that is what you wish to convey. And when you have that point clearly defined and in your mind, the structure of the presentation is all around that thing. So what is the challenge around the particular unique thing that you are going to say? So what is the problem? That can be a gap in the literature, that can be an organizational problem, that can be a problem of inefficient processes. That's your starting point. What is the problem? So you want to give people a sense of urgency. There's a lot going on, but there's and this is how I am going to respond to this problem. I'm going to add this little bit to this problem, and this is how I did it, and this is what comes out. So anyway, this is very stylized and abstract, but I think the point is quite clear.
Well, our colleagues can tell us, but I do think that this is not only important for them, but for many people who are planning to attend an evaluation conference. Things to keep in mind. Well, if there is no other question until this point, I think I would move to the other topic of discussion, which is about your experience, about mistakes that we should avoid at a conference, any story that you want to tell about your first time at an evaluation conference, things that you don't want to repeat or learning.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a difficult point. So first of all, being a good presenter is a little bit of an art. It depends also a little bit on your personality, but it's also something you can learn. I think the biggest mistake that I made, and I continue to make it sometimes, is that I focus too much on the content. And the mistakes that I made in many presentations at the beginning of my career was that I put too much content in the presentation. So that is definitely something you do not wish to do. So not too much content, do not focus too much on the content, and thirdly, and this is the more important point, stay in touch with your audience. So really monitor, interact, gauge what is your audience thinking about. Are they falling asleep when you're in your 7th slide of operational challenges, or are they really following your logic and you're really hitting the right tone? Is there a need to pause or not? So being in touch with your audience is another important point. This is something that's difficult to assess and also depends on the type of presentation. I like the yEES smaller presentations because they really offer a forum for more interactive kind of presentation. I have a number of general lessons, of which I already mentioned a few. So content is important, but do not lose your audience. Be very much aware of how they react to you, and that also can make you decide to speed up on certain topics or slow down. So speeding up means you are describing something, giving them background content, but then you suddenly see mobile phones appearing, and then you see laptops and or people yawning or whatever. That's a sign for you to move on. Move on. Get something. Another sign, which is quite the contrary, is that you make a very difficult point, and then you see people looking very concentrated at you, and then maybe I elucidated again using different words. So this is what I mean with do not lose contact with your audience. Second big mistake that is made in many conferences, and we are not just talking about people who are starting their careers, but people who have been doing it for 30 years, or some people just never learn. I don't know, and I also make many mistakes. It's overpopulated slides. There's nothing worse than a slide that is so full of information that you have to spend all this time reading the slides. So, of course, you may have heard this before, and it's not rocket science, but you have to, if you stand up and you put your piece of paper on the floor, letter format or A4, and you can read the slide very clearly, that's a good sign. If you cannot read anything, it goes off, gone.
I've never heard that.
Yeah. So, slides that are really to the core. You want people listening to you, not just reading slides and getting lost in the content of the slide. So don't overpopulate yourself.
Jos, before you go into the next one, we were also talking about the use of lightning talks and what is the difference between a lightning talk and a conference presentation, or can, for example, those who don't have content present a lightning talk because they don't have that much to say, so they would use a smaller amount of time and do something very brief instead of a 10 or 15 minutes presentation. How do you see it?
Yeah. So, personally, I think a lightning talk, which is a real, saying something in 3 minutes, is not something that requires less content than a full presentation. So it's not easier. I think a lightning talk is really going to the core of a particular issue. So making a very strong, convincing argument in an inspirational way in a very short time span. So it is not something that is necessarily easier to do, or it's not necessarily something that is lends itself to something, if you do not have a lot of content, just do a lightning talk. So a lightning talk is, I give you that example at some point. A presentation can be a house where you describe the walls, the windows, the doors, the furniture, the bathroom, appliances, etc. And a lightning talk takes that house but makes a very synthetic to the core abstraction of it. So the walls and the foundations and the doors, but it's still the core of that bigger thing. If you really do not have a clear storyline or point you want to make, the lightning talk is not the solution. Having said that, always feel free to have short presentations and just convey some incomplete thoughts around challenges that you are facing, the hypothesis that you are finding from bodies of evaluative work, particular challenges that you're facing in your evaluative processes. It is perfectly defensible to talk about that and to just have short conversations about that. but really spend some time in preparing that. Think about it clearly, because even in your short presentation, convey a very clear message. So, yeah.
That's very clear.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. I think, I already made many points about presentation. So, again,
I remember you saying you were also talking about this tendency to go on the steps, to focus too much on the steps and forget what you're saying and forget about describing too much, I think.
Mm-hmm. You mean being too descriptive?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This is a little bit of an art. I mean, I think I already said that clearly. People want to be inspired there. They want to learn something, and you have to see a presentation as a house where, in the end, you present the beautiful flag on top of the house. But in order to get there, you have to present the different components of the house that hold together this flag post, but without lingering too much on it. So a good presentation is a very focused presentation that gives you enough of different angles to get to the main point. A bad presentation is just different sections of description on different things. This was the problem, blah, 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 blah. This was the context, blah, 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 blah. This is what we did, blah, 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 blah. This is what we found, blah, blah, blah. For me, that's not a good presentation, because it doesn't make a point. I mean, it's just conveying what you have been doing. And frankly, nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear your unique additional thought on something. And it can be about anything. It can be even, I'm exaggerating, it can be about why this is a good color of the walls in this office. If you have a fantastic conceptual approach about how you think this reduces animosity between colleagues, gives you a peaceful sense of mind and enhances productivity. If you have a fantastic conceptual approach to describing why that color of the wall is feeding into these causal processes, that is amazing. But just don't go around saying, this is like this, and we are all around sitting here, and then there's a screen, and we don't care about it. Sorry, maybe it's too. I'm how to say that, diverging.
No. Do you have any advice for those who stress too much before the presentation?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of stress is good. It's good because you are focused. You want to make a good impression. But in the end, feel comforted by the fact, and I'm repeating myself, that you are the person who knows most about your topic. And you are the director of your own play, so you can go about it the way you want. And generally speaking, evaluators are very nice people. They have seen they have lots of stress when they come to a conference. They want to relax and talk with their colleagues. They don't want to eat you. They don't want to attack you. They are very nice. So knowing that they are, fallible human beings and generally very nice, I'm sure it will help you relax.
People will try to help.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I'm not sure if you have any additional thought, any additional questions. If you don't, yes,
Mariana, there's been in the chat. I posted one.
Okay.
Also said something, but I can also say it out loud because it does relate. It's about the confidentiality and the fact that I would see that, for instance, the yEES conference would really drive to have very open discussion and so. But how do you tackle the fact that, because there is still not too many sort of, for instance, if you would talk about experiences of your previous evaluations you've done, it would, you would. The interesting part of it would be something that would sort of portray the institution with the sort of not maybe in the best light.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
How do you delicately address those issues and deliver the same way that yeah. So confidentiality question. Thanks.
If I can add. It's a very good question which you read my mind. So I also was wondering how to present experience of doing evaluation within the organization without conveying a message of sending organization.
I didn't catch that.
Can you write that down, Elena? Because we hear you with echo. If you can write it down and someone else read it, but we can maybe go ahead with the...
Yeah, so the first question about confidentiality and disclosure. So, sorry. So we are evaluators, so it's about speaking truth to power. So that is an important main leitmotif. At the same time, we do not want to just unnecessarily criticize, name and shame, or cross any corporate policies of confidentiality or disclosure. So I think the general message of what is a challenge in an organization or what is something that can go wrong in projects or which are of interest for the learning processes of evaluators, they should be conveyed, they should be shared. However, there are two ways of doing that. So one way I have sometimes done formally is to simply anonymize it. So if the situation is not well known, simply anonymizing the organization or the organizational context and all the people is a good solution. If that scenario already shows, already a lot can be derived from it, given the knowledge that some people may have of the particular country context or something, I would go for a completely different tactic. I would completely generalize my argument, or maybe even make it hypothetical. So I want to get across that there is a lot of corruption, or there's a lot of, there's a lot of informal processes of clientelism and exchange and favoritism in public sector environments, and I want to get that across, and I want to also talk about how you can look at that, but I want to do that in a general way, so I'm not referring to a particular project setting or country setting, and I don't want, so I am not directly accusing certain people, organizations, or countries of particular practices. So I think, as an evaluator, you are a trusted advisor. You are a trusted knowledge broker. So we are all multiple identities in one. We are researchers, we are politicians, we are technicians, and we are diplomats, and we are trusted advisors. So we have to be respectful of the information disclosure issues around the evaluant that we're working on. So it's very, very important, but generally speaking, the analytical lessons that we derive from it should be conveyed, again, by anonymizing or generalizing or hypothesizing about it. Is that helpful?
Fantastic.
Thank you. Hello. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, very helpful, and then Natia, you can continue. I think Alena had something related to this, but I also didn't catch it. Sorry.
Can I ask, or should I wait for Alena's question?
Yes. No, please go ahead.
Yes. Thanks so much, first of all, for the discussion and the great suggestions that you provided. It will be very useful for us. My question is not that much related to the presentation skills and so forth. It's more about innovation in evaluation. So we were supposed to develop the abstracts that are innovative, but I also had some struggle, like what is considered innovation in evaluation nowadays? At least can you share your ideas and experience? What is considered as an innovative
approaches to evaluation, independent evaluation group. And also, as you said, like having unique approach of measuring the complexity is good enough, or we have to think like interdisciplinary ways of measuring the impact, or any other ideas. I would really appreciate your ideas and experience on this.
Yeah. Okay, good question. So first of all, generally speaking, in innovation, talk about innovation flows from a good understanding about what is not innovative. So I've been in many conversations where somebody claims something is innovative, and it's very clear that the person doesn't have a full understanding of what is the conventional practice, or so something may not be innovative. So going and making a claim about something that is innovative without knowing the literature or the existing practice, that is a big mistake to avoid. Now, more concretely, what are some of the innovations in methodology that we are seeing and that we are trying to promote? First of all, I have to make a difference between innovation from what perspective. So a lot of the things that we are doing now in IAG or promoting are innovative for evaluation or innovative for IAG, but may have been around in the applied behavioral and social sciences for 30 years or more. So, but it's innovative for us and innovative for evaluation. So that is a difference to make. In other cases, it's innovative for the world in general. So to give you a few examples, what I think is a little bit innovative is new applications in systems thinking, translating ideas from systems theory and complexity science and new methods, such as, for example, systems mapping, systems dynamics, critical systems heuristics. All these things are relatively new. They have been around, but they are relatively new in evaluation. The second area where there's a lot of innovative work going on in evaluation, but not necessarily in the social and behavioral sciences, is case-based causal analysis. So either from the perspective of in-depth N-1 case-based causal analysis, for example, process tracing, or medium N configurational analysis using pattern matching, QCA, etc. So these are relatively new things in evaluative practice, but not new in the social and behavioral sciences. A third very important field, and that's very, very broad, is the whole set of opportunities and applications on new advances in data science and data analytics. So think about using remote sensing data, think about using social media data, think about using data from financial transactions, from mobile phone data. So there's big data analysis, but there is also data analysis from new data sources. And there are lots of examples there. On the data science perspective, more particularly, applications of machine learning are becoming more useful in evaluative practice. So these are some examples of innovative areas of methodological inquiry where IAG is doing stuff in all of these areas, a little bit, piloting or using it more frequently. And then there are more conventional areas, I would say. Some of these are already not, where we are just taking up methods that have been around there for a long time, even in evaluation, and we are reusing them. Such as, for example, Delphi panels. We haven't been doing that a lot, but in particularly evaluative contexts, the Delphi panel may be very useful. Mm-hmm. This is not innovative for evaluation, it's not innovative for social and behavioral sciences, but it's innovative for our institution. So again, lots of innovation going on, and I think these different fields that I just mentioned.
Thank you very much. We are almost reaching out the final stage. I do encourage you to write us questions. If you have additional questions, we can always address them together and then send them back to you, send the answers back to you. Let me finalize by wrapping up. We have this webinar was very interesting because it focused on both presentation skills, how should you behave, how can you prepare yourself, what kinds of things can you think about when you are presenting, but also in relation to the PowerPoint that you use, how can you structure it? And on the other hand, what I found very, very interesting is the methodological approach to an evaluation conference. I think we have many takeaways from here. The structure, what is the difference between an evaluation conference and other types of conferences? How can you still talk about your work and what you've learned over the last year without having a very concrete report or a very concrete finding in your hands? Which means I think this is a very interesting call for other evaluators who do not have something concrete to present, because this means that an evaluation conference is not a place where you go when you have something very specific, but is a space that you attend every year to have these dialogues and to express your challenges and to exchange ideas. And that's where the learning comes from, not from showing up and showcasing something very successful, but from having this constant ongoing dialogue and getting to know your colleagues. And so for me, this was the major outcome and the message that I want those who watch this webinar later to convey. Well, to all of you, first of all, a big thanks to Jos, who is very objective always in his answers and very wise. And thanks to all of you who had dedicated so much time thinking about this and putting energy in the questions, of course, not to mention all the other work you've been doing. I do wish you a wonderful period before the conference. I know you will be successful at the labs because success here means that you open yourselves to this learning opportunity. And from what I've seen of you, I know that you have that in your blood. So thank you very much and hope to see you in Thessaloniki.
Thank you, esteemed colleagues.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Bye. Look forward to see you.
Very nice
Thanks
talking to you.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thank you.